What I want to examine in this video today is the question of, is scale modeling art?
No, it's not.
Okay, I'll bite. Why not?
Art is painting, statues, stuff like that.
Yeah, it is those things, but at the same time, there's more to it than just...
It's like that guy on PBS. You know the one. What's his name? Bill Ross, that does all the, happy little bushes and squirrels and stuff.
You mean Bob Ross?
No, never heard of him. But anyway, Bill Ross, he paints stuff on canvas, with real paints, and he's got real artistic talent.
Yeah, that's all true, but you've really got to consider things beyond just...
We were discussing this at our last IMPS meeting. In fact, Russ Shackelford brought up a great point that I thought really hit home when you think about it. He said, what was it he said? How did that go? It involved a squirrel and then a syringe, but it was a good point regarding art.
For years, I've seen a lot of discussion about the question of, is scale modeling art? Is it art? Is it hobby? What is it? And I know when you get right down to it, it doesn't really matter. It's a very subjective thing that everybody's going to have their own opinions about and their own thoughts about. And it's hard to say, okay, any one definition is exactly right. But it is something that over the years I've seen has gotten a fair amount of space in forums and on social media, and sometimes it actually gets quite contentious. I'm a big fan of defining terms. That way we know what we're talking about. So I did a quick Google search to find out, what is art? Art is the expression or application of human creative skill and imagination, typically in a visual form such as painting or sculpture, producing works to be appreciated primarily for their beauty or emotional power. Now, even with that definition there, which is a pretty standard definition of art, and there are obviously many others, but even with that definition, it's still fairly wide open. And I get that a lot of folks will say, yeah, but what we do, we build pre-made kits and we just put some paint on them based on instructions and other things like that. We're not taking a canvas that's just flat and creating something out of our imagination. Or we're not taking a rock and chipping away everything until all that's left is some shape or form that we recognize. And I get that. But I think at the same time, we have to look at the notion that this is a creative process. This is an expressive process. Now, maybe it's not for you. Maybe, you look at the instructions for a kit. I used to do this with aircraft all the time. Look at the instructions for a kit and I paint it just like it shows, and I put on the decals just like it shows, and I maybe give it a panel line wash and I call it done. I didn't put a whole lot of creativity into it. I just simply followed the instructions, almost like a three-dimensional paint by numbers. So I get that. But that personal creativity part, I think we need to examine that. Now, maybe I'm weird, and I probably am, but maybe I'm weird, but when I'm building a model, it's not just a process of putting paint on to the model. It's not just a process of applying decals and weathering and things like that. In my mind, I think about, what would it be like to be in this thing? What would it be like to use this thing? What if this thing were real? How would this look? I still have almost a 10-year-old mindset when I approach the hobby, that I try to pull back to those roots of when I was a kid, when imagination would reign free, that we were okay with pretending that, yeah, I'm in this little airplane that I'm flying around, or I'm in this little tank that I'm driving along, or I'm in this spaceship that I'm zooming around in my backyard. I'm in it. The pew-pew noises I make, that's my lasers. When I go, whoosh, that's the engine. Now, yeah, I don't do that in my backyard because that'd probably take me away pretty quick if I did that. But there's still that imagination process that goes on, that creative process that is more than just, I'm going to do some paint and I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to set it aside, and there's not going to be any emotion involved with it. And if there's not, quite honestly, I feel sorry for you. I really do. Now, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. If that's how you model, if you model and you glue it together and you paint it and you do stuff to it and you finish and you set it down and you don't think about it again, and there was really no emotional involvement, it's just something to do. But if that works for you, cool, keep doing it. If that counts as fun, then go ahead and do it. But for me, it is very much an emotional process. And for so many other people I talk to, if I really ask them, tell me about your modeling, they start describing it in a process that sounds very emotional, often very childlike. And I think that's a good thing. But that's still not answering the question of, is scale modeling art? In some ways, it's like examining the old question of, is the glass half full or half empty? Not thinking about the optimistic, pessimistic part of it, but just thinking about how do you describe a thing? Everybody's going to approach it from a different angle. So I get that some people are going to look at scale modeling and they're going to look at the way it affects them, and they're going to look at the way that they look at other people's work, and they're going to go, oh yes, this is most definitely art. I definitely fall into that camp, because there's times that I look at somebody else's work and they've done a really good job, and there's some emotional involvement in that. Sometimes I get excited because it looks so cool. There have been a few times that I've even seen some kind of diorama or some kind of modeling that moved me to a deeper, almost tearful emotion, either because it evoked such a strong image, or it was so well done, or I knew the challenges they had gone through to get to that point. Sometimes in my own work, there's times where I get done and there's a deep satisfaction of, okay, this isn't perfect, but man, this is really showing some progress. And other times I get done and I think about all of the challenges that I went through as I built that kit that were maybe outside of the hobby completely, but I can look back at those pictures and go, yeah, that was what helped me get through that time. And in those cases, there's no denying that there's some emotion going on there, that there is emotion being poured into it, whether it's anger or happiness or frustration or just wanting to get away from the world and just paint for a little while. That's emotions. And I know others are going to say, no, I completely disagree. I think that what we do is just static reproductions of things, whether they're real or whether they're imagined. It's just a hobby, and hobby is not art, and art is not hobby. And I know that if that's the way you think, and again, I'm not even saying that's wrong. I'm just saying it's different. If that's the way you think, I'm not even trying to convince you to think otherwise. Well, so now that I've said that there's no answer to this question, then you're probably thinking, okay, Mr. YouTube man, what is the point that you're getting at? Right now I'm filming this and it's near the end of April 2022. I don't have to tell everybody all the things that are going on in the world that are just tough. It's been a tough few years for the whole world. There's things going on that nobody wants to see. All of us go through things in our personal life every day that are gut-wrenching. We have health issues, we have financial issues, we lose dear friends that we never saw that coming. All of these things go on. But the one thing that kind of pulls us all together is modeling. Whether you like the word or not, we are a community. We are a group of people with a common interest in mind and common goals, and we think about many of the same things. And even across languages and borders and everything else, it can draw us together. So here's what I would challenge you to the next time you are faced with the question of, is scale modeling art? don't be selfish in your answer. Now, by that I mean, don't think just, what does it mean to me? Because you know what it means to you. And whatever stance you take, you know that if you tell that to someone else, that they may or may not agree with that stance. And if they agree with you, great, everything's happy. If they disagree with you, it suddenly becomes a point of contention. And in that regard, it is just a hobby. It's not worth worrying over. So, what's really important? I would submit, think of the other person. The next time that somebody talks about, here's a model that was done by this artist, or here's a model that was done by this modeler, if their approach to how they evaluate what we do does not coincide with yours, don't worry about it. Be the kind of friend that goes, if you think it's art, then I'm okay calling it art because that's important to you. And the friendship that we have, that we share with our common hobby is more important than some definition, because we're not talking about interest rates or legal issues or anything that's definable and we have to be a little more precise about. And if somebody doesn't agree that it's not art, don't worry about it. It's okay that they don't think that. Give them the freedom to think how they want to think about it. And if you think it's art, great. Even if you mention it, hey, I personally think it's art, but I think what you're doing is great. Do the kind thing. I think, and I know a lot of folks, if they've gotten to this point at all and didn't, see the thumbnail, watch 2 minutes in, click off and leave me a bad comment. A lot of people at this point are probably thinking, this is the most wishy-washy stuff I've ever heard. Yeah, maybe it is. Maybe it is. I'm okay with being accused of that because I think it's more important to think of other people than it is to always be so selfish in our thinking to feel that everything we believe has to be what everybody else believes when it comes to this hobby. Because yeah, there are some important issues that, yeah, there's truth and some of the things just aren't negotiable. 1 + 1 = 2. You may not think it is. It is. But in this hobby, there's no need to take some kind of stand for something so mundane as, is it art or is it not? Most of the time when I see this come up on forums and social media now, I just move on because I know that there's very little that any one person can say to another one that will change their mind. And the more contentious it gets, the more most people are going to approach it from the mindset of, I need to win. But I think what's helpful is if sometimes we stand back and we go, I don't have to win. It doesn't matter. I care more about you as a modeler than I do about my opinion about something so subjective. So yeah, this video is a little different, but I hope it's given you something to think about. I hope it's given you some food for thought that in the hobby, we don't always have to be dogmatic about everything. Sometimes it's okay to just step back and go, yeah, that's cool, man. That's cool. If that's what you think, I'm more worried about, did you have fun? Because you know me, that's always the question that I ask. Did you have fun? Because it truly is something I believe and I really feel like it makes the hobby just take off in a way that if you've never experienced it, will just free you up to say, if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Why else would you do art or hobby if they're not enjoyable, if they're not fun, if they're not in some way emotionally gratifying, if it's some way of getting your expressive side out? Because there's so much else in the world that's trying to keep us from not doing that. So the next time you disagree with somebody, be kind in your response. Be kind. Well, thank you so much for watching this video, especially if you're still hanging around at this point. You're one of an elite few that would hang around in this kind of video to the very end, so I am very grateful for it. You know the routine. If you haven't subscribed yet, there's a subscribe button down over here. Click that. There's a little bell icon that lets you know when I have out other videos, and I promise most of my other videos are about modeling, not about touchy-feely stuff. But there's also, if you would hit the like little symbol, the little thumbs up, and also drop a comment down below and let me know what you think. I'd appreciate hearing from you. There's also links down below to the social media that I'm on and to Patreon. So if you'd like to support the work that I do, please check that link out. And if you're already a Patreon supporter, thank you so much for the support you give to me and ultimately to my family, because what you do for me allows me to do things that we just couldn't afford for me to do otherwise. And so me and my family want to express our gratitude for it, that you stick with me through the tough times, through the boring times and the exciting times and everything else in between. We thank you for it. And I'll leave you with this one final thought, as I always like to do. In this hobby or this art, if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Happy day to you, friends. Bye-bye. Who was that other guy? Way back a long time ago. Michelangelo? He did a lot of statues that had no arms and stuff. I don't know why he wouldn't put arms on his things. And then there was that other guy, Leonard, what was his name? He painted the famous picture of that lady. Was it Mona Jones? Yeah, that's the lady down at the diner. Mona.